A warm welcome to everyone to the anesthesia class. The class that we are going to study today about is the continuation of the airway equipment part 1 class, where we had started about the face mask and the endotracheal tubes. So today we are going to study about the supraglottic airway devices, also known as the extraglottic airway devices or the LMAs. The other name for them are laryngeal mask airways, that are your LMAs. Seriously speaking, the introduction of the supraglottic airway devices has actually revolutionized the anesthesia practice, because with recent advances, the SGS have become so much perfect that they can prevent against the aspiration almost in the similar fashion like the endotracheal tube intubations, and thus there are numerous anesthesia practitioners who have actually switched over to the SGS over the endotracheal intubations, and that what makes SGS the hot favorite of all the anesthesia practitioners, including the examiners too. SGS were first developed by Dr. Archie Brain. When we talk about the SGS, the most important thing that comes in your NEET PGs is the image based questions, because we have a lot of SGS, out of which there are some commonly used or used and certain recently introduced LMAs. So I'll be showing you of all the images of those SGAs and the characteristic findings of those SGAs that can help you in identifying that what type of LMA it is. But before that, let's have a quick recap of what could be the advantages and disadvantages of your SGAs over the face mask ventilation and your endotracheal tube intubation. See, when we compare the SGA with the face mask, you can see when we have introduced the supraglottic airway devices, our hands are free. It gives a better airway patency and a better seal, and it also protects better against the airway aspiration with less OT pollution and less trauma to the face or the facial nerve. But the disadvantages are it still is invasive, it can risk the airway for trauma, it requires certain amount of skills, and yes, the patient has to be sedated for the introduction of the SGA, and there are certain conditions where you cannot introduce the SGA like restricted mouth openings. In comparison to tracheal intubations, the advantages is that it is less invasive than ET tubes. It is quite useful in conditions of difficult intubation. If you remember the algorithm for the difficult intubation, it is the plan B, right? There are less chances of laryngospasm and bronchospasm. Actually, the tolerance of the supraglottic airway devices is much better than your endotracheal tubes, and the emergence of the patient after general anesthesia is quite smooth when you're using your SGS. Not only during extubation, but even the stress response of the intubation is very less in SGAs as compared to your endotracheal tube insertions. Moreover, for the introduction of the supraglottic airway device, we don't need compulsorily the skeletal muscle relaxants, whereas when we talk about the endotracheal tubes, we have to use the muscle relaxants. Most importantly, if you can think, can the supraglottic airway device can ever be endobronchial or lead to esophageal intubations? No. So that is a beauty of supraglottic airway devices. AT tubes can go in esophagus, they can be endobronchial, whereas the SGAs, they are present over the glottic opening. They don't cross your vocal cords. Thus, no chances of endobronchial intubations or esophageal intubations. But the disadvantage of SGAs are that still they are not the full proof system of prevention of aspiration. When we talk about the definitive airway, it is still your endotracheal tube or your tracheostomies to prevent against the aspiration. Secondly, SGs are time bound. The duration has to be around 1.5 to 2 hours. They are time limited, and they cannot be used for post-op ventilation in ICUs. In cases in which we need a ICU care post-operatively, or suppose you have introduced an SGA and something happens intraoperatively that you decide that the patient is not hemodynamically stable, he has to be shifted to the ICU on ventilator, the SGAs have to be replaced with the endotracheal tubes. Done. And one more important thing which I'd forgotten is the positioning part. SGS cannot be used in prone or jackknife position, whereas endotracheal tubes can be used in any position. Now coming upon or a lot of images, the very first image that you can see, these days it is not only the equipment that are being asked, even they are giving the image like this and asking what it is and why it is used or what technique this is called. This is the Bailey maneuver. If you can see clearly, we have an endotracheal tube which is inserted, and on the back of the endotracheal tube we have the introduction of your SGA. These are generally done in those patients where you are anticipating a difficult extubation, or in patients like obese patients where there could be a lot of tongue fall. The chances of the tongue fall are very high. In those patients, or in the patients of, for example, who have undergone a thyroid surgery and you are not sure of the recurrent laryngeal nerve palsies, whether it was present or the recurrent laryngeal nerve is intact or not. In those cases, you can introduce the supraglottic airway device over the endotracheal tube, and as soon as the endotracheal tube is out, the patient can ventilate itself, and thus that panicky situation of can't intubate, can't oxygenate or can't ventilate can be finished. So that is the Bailey maneuver, introduction of your supraglottic airway device on the back of your endotracheal tube, especially in those cases where we are anticipating a difficult extubation, or we are anticipating that there could be a persistent tongue fall. Done. The photo that I am showing you on the right is that of a classic LMA. See, various kinds of LMAs have been developed, but the basic structure of a LMA remains the same. The first conventionally developed LMA by Archie Brain was this classic LMA, which consisted of a elliptical spoon-shaped, bowl-shaped cuff, which has a ventral cuff, and in the newer one we have a dorsal cuff also. Then you have an airway tube which is connected to a proximal connector. In recently introduced, now you have two tubes. One is the airway tube and the other is your drain tube. You have an inflation line for inflating this cuff with air, a pilot balloon, a spring loaded one way valve is present. Then you have the apertures for the ventilation, and in tubes in LMAs where you have a drain tube also attached along with, you have an orifice which opens into the esophageal opening. Now this is the basic structure of any LMA. Coming to the insertion of the LMA. The first thing is, please remember, as practitioners, the first and the very thing you all have to know is where not to introduce the LMAs. This is the most important thing, where you do not have to use the LMAs. Where? Full stomach patient, where there is very high chances of aspiration, don't use LMAs. Like intestinal obstruction, diaphragmatic hernias, meconium aspiration syndrome babies, or tracheoesophageal fistulas. Then relatively cautiously it has to be used in obesity, in pregnancy. These are not foolproof contraindications but relative contraindications. Done. Obesity, laparoscopic surgery, you have to be very cautious when you're using these LMAs in these patients. Then the contraindications complete absolute could be your RODS. RODS is R stands for restricted mouth opening. That is the mouth opening less than 2 centimeters. You cannot introduce your LMA. Obstruction. There is some obstructing feature in the mouth like a mass or blood or secretions in which LMA cannot be inserted. Distorted anatomy like oromaxillofacial surgeries or trauma patients. in which the anatomy is distorted, you cannot use LMA. And last is the stiff lung. If the compliance of the lung is not good, then you should not use LMAs, because the positive pressure ventilation or the PEEP which is generated in endotracheal tube, similar kind of PEEP cannot be generated in your LMAs. After the contraindication, the second thing is the correct size. You have to select the correct size, because if the size is small, then there would be a leak, and if the size is big, then in itself will lead to the obstruction. Now, how is the size decided? In endotracheal tube, we had studied it is the age that matters, but in SGAs, it is the weight that matters. What matters is the weight. On all the LMAs, the size is decided by the weight. For example, on this airway tube itself, it is written that this is meant for 60 to 80 kgs, it is meant for 40 to 60 kgs, or 10 to 20 kgs. Conventionally, adult males we put a 4-number LMA, and adult females we generally prefer a 3-number LMA. The thing that is asked mostly about the LMAs are where it actually sits in your airway. So please remember this very nicely. The tip of the LMA sits on the upper esophageal sphincter, UES. This is the tip of the LMA, and this is the orifice for the introduction of the gastric tube also. You introduce your ING tube from here, the drain tube, and it opens into the esophagus from this orifice which sits on the upper esophageal sphincter. The sides of the LMA sits on the pyriform fossa. The sides of the LMA sits on the pyriform fossa. The base of the LMA sits on the base of the tongue. Done. And the dorsal surface of the LMA sits on the hypopharynx. It rests in the hypopharynx. Please remember this: tip, upper esophageal sphincter; sides, pyriform fossa; base of the tongue. The dorsal surface rests on the hypopharynx. Done. Generally, these LMAs are disposable, but yes, they can be recycled, they can be reused, not actually recycled, they can be reused. They can be reused around 40 times. This is asked. They are reused around 40 times, and the method of sterilization for the LMAs is ETO, ethylene oxide sterilization. Ethylene oxide. This is the sterilization process for the ET tubes also. Please remember, ethylene oxide. We have various kinds of LMAs and videolaryngoscopes. In the last class, I had forgotten to show you the picture of the videolaryngoscope. So this is the videolaryngoscope, which can be connected to a monitor, or it could be connected to the screen which is connected to the blade itself. We have various kinds of supraglottic airway devices. See, the supraglottic airway devices are classified according to various classifications, like but the most important, the commonly asked classification is that of the first generation and the second generation supraglottic airway device, which will be coming to next. See, the classification is known as the Miller's classification. If asked, Miller's classification is used to classify which airway equipment, it is your supraglottic airway device. Now, the devices can be divided upon the lumens or generations. First, second generation. The first generation does not have a drain tube. There is no drain. Single lumen device it is. Only a airway tube is present, like in your classic LMA, unique, your AMBU LMAs, and Cobra perilaryngeal airways, your COPA. Double lumen, you have airway tube. Along with that, you have a drain tube for the insertion of NG, nasogastric tubes. These are your ProSeals, Combi tubes, iGels, and Busca LMAs. Triple lumen. Triple lumen are your Elisha airway devices, where along with the airway and the drain tube, you have a fiber optic insertion tube also. So it is a triple lumen device. This is the most importantly asked classification. Other than that, they can be divided according to the sealing mechanism, whether they are the perilaryngeal sealers, they are the pharyngeal sealers, or they are pre-shaped pharyngeal sealers like slipper or eye gel. They can be divided according to that. Out of all of this, what you have to remember is your eye gel. It is a cuffless pre-shaped sealer. This is very important that it is cuffless pre-shaped sealer because it is being used a lot these days. Then based upon the directional ability, esophageal sealing and cuff, there's one more classification of the LMA. If interested, kindly take the screenshots for the same and you can read upon the classification. But the most important, I've already told you, is single, double and triple lumen. And overall, if asked, the Miller's classification is used for the classification of your SGAs. Coming to the images, classic LMA, I've already told you. Then you can have LMA proceed. See, when we are talking about the image-based question, how it is framed is, suppose this image is given and a clinical scenario is given along with this image, like in which condition can this image show, this airway equipment which is being shown is used, okay, or in which condition it cannot be used. So this is kind of the case scenarios which come. So let's see, this is the ProSeal. How it is different from the classic LMA? It has two drains. One is the airway tube and one is your drain tube for the insertion of your Ryle's tube. Done. It has an inflatable ventral cuff as well as is that it has an inflatable dorsal cuff also. This is your ProSeal. The difference between this and this is according to the sealing pressure. You have to remember this, the sealing pressure. The sealing pressure is that how much pressure or against what pressure these LMAs can protect us against aspiration. Suppose the intragastric pressure increases to what extent that aspiration chances will increase. That is the sealing pressure. For classic LMA, it is just 25 centimeter water. So very less protection is against the aspiration. But when we talk about the second generation LMAs or the ProSeals or iGel, Busca mask, they give a sealing pressure of around 60 centimeter of water, which is well sufficient for your laparoscopic surgeries, your pregnant surgeries in obesity, etc. These are the recommendation of the sizes. I'm again telling in LMAs, the size is decided according to the weight of the patient. Now, there are two things. I've already told you about the oropharyngeal sealing pressure of a first generation and a second generation LMA. There is one more thing. If you clearly see that airway tube, please go to the OTs to have a look on the supraglottic airway devices. On the airway tube, there's always mentioned less than 60 centimeter of water, which means the intra-cuff pressure, because I told you it is cuffed, the ventral cuff and the dorsal cuff which is present, inflation tube is there and you add air into that inflation tube. How much volume of air has to be introduced depends upon what size of LMA you are into what size of LMA you have inserted. In 4 number, around 30 ml of air has to be inserted. In 2 number, only 15 to 20 ml of air is needed. So that pressure which the intra-cuff or the cuff exerts on your airway is known as the intra-cuff pressure, which maximally has to be 60 centimeter of water or lesser than that, so that you don't have a airway trauma. That is your intra-cuff pressure. Done. Now moving to various other kinds of LMA. Flexible LMA, as your flexometallic tube, it has a wire reinforced airway tube. I hope you'll be able to recognize that this is a flexible LMA. Other than that, in difficult intubation cases, there is one more kind of LMA we use, that is LMA fast track or ILMA. The case based on ILMA could be like a difficult intubation case is there, but only endotracheal intubation is required for the case to take place smoothly. So in those cases, if you have LMA fast tracks, these are intubating LMAs and they have the aperture such that the endotracheal tube can be inserted through these LMAs and intubation, successful intubation can be done. The special part of these are, it has a very small curved airway tube. It has an epiglottic elevating bar, which is a characteristic distinction of the LMA fast track from other LMAs. Epiglottic elevating bar, the LMA fast track ET tube which can be inserted, the endotracheal tube, this is the endotracheal tube which is being inserted. Okay, your LMA is just till here. Only till here is the LMA, and we have inserted the endotracheal tube from these LMA. Generally, the tubes that we use are flexometallic tubes, but there are special tubes which have been manufactured by the respective manufacturers. So this is your LMA fast track. LMA Supreme. LMA Supreme, characteristically, it has two tubes, airway and drain. It has an integrated bite block, if you can see this. This is an integrated bite block, which is characteristic finding of LMA Supreme along with a anatomic curve. The curve of this is anatomic, that is according to the airway passage. Plus, it has esophageal fins present here. It has esophageal fins, integrated bite block, and it is pre-shaped in the form of the anatomy of the natural airway passage. Then we have a eye gel. Eye gel is made up of a thermoelastomer which changes its shape according to the temperature. It is cuffless. Please remember this. There is no cuff, inflatable cuff, which is present in the eye gel, and it takes the shape of the passage along according to the temperature. Done. It also has an integral bite block and an epiglottis rest which is present in it. It is made up of silicone. Then you have Ambu LMA. Again, the Ambu LMA has that anatomic curve, but how to distinguish it from LMA Supreme? There is no integral bite block and there is no drain tube which is present. Okay. In LMA Supreme, you had that integral bite block and drain tube which is missing in Ambu LMA. Only the shape is the same. Then you have another cuffless LMA, which is the slipper, which is known as streamlined liner of the pharyngeal airway. This is your slipper. It is cuffless and it is said to give a better oropharyngeal leaking or sealing pressure in comparison to the conventionally or the older generation of the LMA. This is a recent introduction, that is slipper. Other than that, the recently introduced cuffless LMA is your Buska LMA. This is the Buska LMA. Please see the photos of Buska LMA and of slipper because they're generally asked whether they are cuffed, they are not cuffed, drain tube is present, not, what about the sealing pressure, because they have been introduced recently. This is your Buska LMA which have an integrated bite block. A suction tube, a angled suction tube is a characteristic finding of Buska LMA, not found in any other LMAs, right? And it also has a cuff. Now talking about the combi tube. This is how the combi tube looks like, and you have to differentiate the combi tube from your double lumen tube. Please don't mix double lumen tubes and your combi tubes, because in combi tubes you have two cuffs. One is the esophageal cuff, this one, and the other is your tracheal cuff. This is your combi tube, whereas in the double lumen tubes you had a bronchial cuff and a tracheal cuff, in which the bronchial cuff was blue in color. So here you have an esophageal cuff and a tracheal cuff, and this forms your combi tube. You have a rush tube or a King's tube. Again, they are double cuff systems, a rush tube and a King tube. This is the Alicia airway device which have a triple lumen for gastric, ventilation, and then for fiber optic port or for endotracheal tube insertion also. It can behave like a intubating LMA. This is a potential question which could be asked. The Alicia airway device. Then you have the Cobra perilaryngeal LMA. The only difference in this is that yes, it has a pharyngeal cuff, And how can you identify this? Because it is shaped, the head of this LMA is shaped like that of a cobra, having a flexible mask grill over it. This is a flexible mask grill over it, shaped like the head of a cobra. We have video laryngoscope. This is how a video laryngoscope looks like. And this is a rigid, I had shown you a flexible fibroscope in the last class. This is a rigid Bullard laryngoscope, in which also you have a eyepiece and you can clearly see the image or where you are going inside, and these two are a part of your difficult intubation cart. So please just remember the pictures of this. This is a Bullard laryngoscope rigid, and this is how your video laryngoscope looks like. Stellate and bougie, they are your airway adjuncts. In case your intubation is failing, you're not able to intubate the patient, then you can use the help of a stellate and the bougie. What is the differences? The stellate, it is introduced along with the endotracheal tube. The stellate is put inside the endotracheal tube. You form a hockey shaped stick. A hockey stick shaped endotracheal tube is formed, and along with the stellate, the tube is inserted inside. But you have to be careful that the stellate does not protrude out. It does not protrude out of the tube. The stellate is present inside the tube. The end of the stellate has to be inside the tube. Second is the bougie. This is the bougie. The function of the bougie is you railroad the tube over the bougie. The bougie is first introduced into the vocal cords, and following the bougie, you railroad your endotracheal tube over the bougie and then take it out. This is the bougie. See, laryngoscopy done. This bougie has been introduced into the vocal cords, and now the endotracheal tube is being railroaded over the bougie. And this is the stellate. The stellate is inside the ET tube, and then it is used for intubation. This is the difference between a stellate and a bougie. Then you have a light optical stellate. This is how the photo looks like. The stellate has a light source attached such that you can see where the light is and thus intubate the patient. These are humidification moisture exchangers, the HME filter, the heat moisture exchangers. The full form is heat moisture exchangers. This you can attach on the Y-piece, or this can be attached at the expiratory port also. There are two places where this can be attached, either on the Y-piece itself or on the expiratory ports. Dead space, very important. The dead space of face mask is the maximum and least is that of endotracheal tubes. I repeat, the dead space of the face mask is maximum and least is endotracheal tube. Now talking about the uses of the LMA, difficult conditions, it is plan B if you all remember. Then for conditions like non-operating room anesthesias, peripheral anesthesias, in professional singers where it is very hazardous for their profession if the recurrent laryngeal nerve palsies are there or they have sore throat, then patients who are meant or can be done under spontaneous ventilations and they don't need controlled ventilation, for that SG is preferred. I'll give you one or two examples of such patients who can be done on spontaneous ventilations. Like for example, you have a fibroadenoma case that can be done on spontaneous ventilation. You need not give skeletal muscle relaxant to the patient. Or there is a lipoma on the arm that can be done under spontaneous ventilation. Then for resuscitation purpose, this can be used, and in those patients who have a cervical spine instability, in those cases also LMA can be preferred. The complications of LMA, aspiration, trauma, bronchospasm chances are very high. Contraindications I've already told, that are rods. Now, after we have completed the SGAs, I just request you to kindly go through the SGAs again, especially the diagrams and the images of the SGA, and try to memorize them once. The thing that was very important, which was left in the last class, were the anatomical differences between the pediatric and the adult airway. Because they use, for example, of McIntosh and Miller blade. Like in adults, we use the McIntosh laryngoscope blade, whereas in pediatric cases, we were using the straight blades that are the Miller blade. Because the epiglottis in pediatrics is long, narrow, and more floppy in comparison to, and even big in comparison to adult epiglottis, and thus lifting of this is difficult, for which we use a Miller's braid. Pediatric airway, larynx is small, it is higher up. It is like at the level of C3, C4, whereas in adults it comes down to C4, C5. The narrowest part, this is a question, the narrowest part of the pediatric airway is the cricoid cartilage or the subglottic area. I repeat, the subglottic area in the pediatric airway is the narrowest part, whereas in adults it is the glottic area which is the narrowest part. I hope this is clear. The head and the occiput are large in pediatric patients. Tongue is larger. Neck is shorter. Larynx is more interior. Intubation could be more difficult in these cases, and majorly the problem comes with the adenoids. Pediatric patients are never posted for nasotracheal intubation until and unless their adenoids, which are present on the posterior pharyngeal wall, has been ruled out. I hope I'm very clear with my sentences. Then the risk of right endobronchial intubation is quite high in pediatric cases because of the short trachea and bronchus. So these are the main anatomical differences between pediatric and adult airway. One question, or what do you say, a star question, is that the pediatric patients are obligate nasal breathers. Okay, till 5 years of age, they're obligate nasal breathers. They don't know how to breathe from their mouth. So be very careful when you're dealing with the pediatric patients with oral or nasal obstructions. And one more important thing that I told you in the last class was that in pediatric airway, we generally prefer using uncuffed tube because of the fear of damage to the subglottic area leading to subglottic stenosis. But recently we have micro cuffed, very soft cuffed tubes which are present, and it has been shown that cuffed tubes do have an edge over the uncuffed tubes even in pediatric airways. This is the tracheostomy tube, which is another definitive airway. You should be able to recognize that yes, this is a tracheostomy tube. The case for the tracheostomy tube could come like can't intubate, can't oxygenate situation can be there. So what is the definitive plan? That is the plan D for such cases is the introduction of tracheostomy tube, or even elective tracheostomies can be done in cases of ICUs where we know that the patient is going to be on ventilator for a very long time, or the patient will not be able to maintain the patency of the airway and the patient lies in a vegetative state. So in all these cases, tracheostomy becomes very important. This is the tracheostomy tube. The contraindication to tracheostomy tube are the same like coagulopathy or the infection in the local area. They all form the tracheostomy contraindications. Ambu bag. See, the ambu bag and other oxygen therapy devices will be covered in the very next class of oxygen therapy. But still, ambu is the ambulatory manual breathing unit, as you all can see here. And the FiO2 through ambu that can be generated is 100%. This is the most important thing for ambu, that the FiO2 which can be generated in ambu is equivalent to that of the endotracheal tube, which is 100%. Now, lastly, we'll come to certain case scenarios. Now, let's see. Suppose a patient you'll get a case of trauma. Suppose a 25-year-old has fallen from a height. So what will be the next step of management, or how are you going to intubate or secure the airway in this patient? Please remember, when it is clearly mentioned about the trauma, Then we take the question mark or in doubt that the cervical spine injury could be present until and unless it has been ruled out. Let me repeat my sentence. In a trauma patient, until and unless cervical spine injury has been ruled out, we assume that it is present. Done? So in these cases, if you remember, what is the technique of choice for bag and mask ventilation? It is nothing but jaw thrust. Very good. And what about the intubation? Now, if you want to intubate the patient, how are you going to intubate? For that, we use a manual inline stabilization, or we apply a Philadelphia collar to the patient in order to stabilize this neck. Okay, in order to stabilize the cervical spine. You can see this picture in this manual inline stabilization the doctor is giving, in which your fingers, your the thumb is on the mastoid, okay, and you are keeping the neck straight without any extension or flexion. This is manual inline stabilization, or the application of Philadelphia collar is done. Then you have a technique of awake intubation. In awake intubation, the case would be like of a difficult, anticipated difficult intubation. Like obesity would be there, or the patient has a mass which is present, or the restricted mouth opening can be there. In all these cases, we prefer an awake intubation where we are actually anticipated that even the bag mask ventilation will become very difficult for us. For example, trismus patients, temporomandibular ankylosis patients, in patients which have an orofacial trauma and the anatomy is totally distorted, you have restricted mouth openings. In those anticipated difficult intubation, the choice of technique is awake intubation. For awake intubation, we have various steps that have to be followed. For example, we have to nebulize the patient with local anesthetics in order to anesthetize the airways. That is 4% lignocaine can be used. Then we can use your viscous gargles can be used. We can use your 10% spray of LMA. Then the pledgets can be introduced into the nasal cavity in order to anesthetize it and vasoconstrict the blood vessels. And majorly what we use are the airway blocks. So these pictures can be given which show you the application of the airway blocks, and then the question can be asked then where these blocks are actually used. What is the clinical application of these blocks? The first block that you can see is that they are blocking intraoral glossopharyngeal nerve. Intraoral glossopharyngeal nerve is being blocked for awake fiber optic intubation. In the second here, you can see the hyoid bone. This is the hyoid. This is the superior corner of the hyoid bone, and we are anesthetizing the superior laryngeal nerve here. What are we anesthetizing? The superior laryngeal nerve. Then this is glossopharyngeal nerve is for the gag reflex, and superior laryngeal nerve is for the cuff or the pharyngeal reflexes. And the last what we do is we pierce this cricothyroid membrane. The membrane between the thyroid cartilage and the cricoid cartilage is pierced, and we block the recurrent laryngeal nerve to suppress the cuff reflex. I repeat, 3 airway blocks are given for airway awake intubation, and this image can be given and asked that what is being done and what use is being done. What is the use of this? This is used in awake intubation to block your superior laryngeal nerve, recurrent laryngeal nerve, and glossopharyngeal nerve. Then you can have retrograde intubations. This is the picture showing retrograde intubation, which is generally done if you have a restricted mouth opening or normal intubation, or we have a Cronbach-Lahan grading of 4 and normal intubation is not being done, or it is not being possible even by a senior anesthetist. In case you can have retrograde intubation where the intubation is done by giving a nick at the cricothyroid membrane. This is the retrograde intubation. A nick is given at the cricothyroid membrane. We introduce a catheter, and along the catheter we introduce the bougie, and then on the bougie we railroad our endotracheal tube. This is the retrograde intubation. Please clearly visualize the image. Second such image is the submental intubation, generally done in orofacial surgeries, in which the symmetry of the face has to be maintained and nasal intubation is contraindicated. In those cases, we choose submental intubation. Mouth opening has to be adequate for submental intubation, and nasal trauma or certain contraindication to nasal intubation is always present. Only then we prefer submental intubations. Yeah? Then you have retromolar intubation done with the help of Bonfils retromolar fiberscope. The question can be both types. The image of the equipment can be shown, and it can be asked for what this is used. Bonfils retromolar intubation scope is done for using the retromolar intubation, generally used in cases where we have very restricted mouth opening or the distortion is there because of the oromaxillofacial trauma. Done. This is the retromolar intubation, where the tube is introduced behind your last molar teeth. I hope the images are clear and you can understand that which is what kind of intubation and what could be the reason behind doing this intubation. This is how the questions will get framed. This is the video laryngoscope. Please see the maneuver here. I hope you all remember this maneuver. This is nothing but rapid sequence induction, which is your Sillix maneuver. In this, what he's doing is Sillix maneuver on the cricoid cartilage. It is giving a pressure such that the esophagus is pressed against your vertebra, and you decrease the chances of aspiration, especially done in patients of full stomach if they have NPO status, which is not appropriate. In those cases, we do RSI to intubate the patient, the rapid sequence intubation, Salix maneuver. The pressure is given of 30 to 40 newtons on the cricoid cartilage, because the cricoid cartilage is a complete ring enclosing your esophagus, and the esophagus is compressed against your vertebra. Done. The last image that you can see here is cricothyrotomies. This is needle cricothyrotomy, which is used as plan D when you have a can't intubate, can't oxygenate condition. For that, surgical access has to be there. So this picture is showing your needle cricothyrotomy. Use is in difficult intubations when as a part of plan D, in which we can't intubate and can't oxygenate the patient. Done. I hope these two images are clear to you all. This pneumothorax. Sometimes in airway management, such x-rays can also come. That LIX x-ray is like a patient is deteriorating and maybe a central line was being inserted, or it's a trauma patient who have come to the casualty and we have to manage the airway. But even after the securing of the endotracheal tube, still the saturation is not being maintained, the breath sounds are not good, and on auscultation you have a tympanic note that is being formed, and when the x-ray has been done, you can clearly visualize a tracheal shift and also a black image here which shows you the pneumothorax with the lung collapsed. So what would be the management? The management would be the introduction of a needle immediately on the second intercostal space. You have a needle inserted followed by the ICD insertion. Intercostal drain has to be inserted in such cases. Then you can be asked what is the definitive airway, and we are just revising now. Definitive airways are two only, tracheostomy and endotracheal intubation. From the last class, these two questions. One, suppose the patient is obese. During induction, you are not able to ventilate the patient. So what airway adjunct are you going to prefer? You are going to prefer your oropharyngeal airway because after inductions, the gag reflex is already gone. It's an obese patient. You cannot ventilate because the tongue has fallen over the posterior pharyngeal wall. So the best scene to use a OPA. After extubation, the patient is conscious, the limb movement is there, but still the saturation is not there. It is desaturating because of the persistent tongue fall. But the patient has limb movements, the patient is conscious, the patient has a gag reflex. In these cases, we prefer the airway adjunct, that is your NPA, nasopharyngeal airway. Murphy eye. Yes, a part of Murphy eye is an alternative for the alternative pathway of ventilation. How do you detect endobronchial intubation? Right side most common because it is wide, short and in straight line. How to detect it? Increase in inspiratory pressure. Other than that, clinical signs, that auscultation you can find it out, and the chest rise will not be symmetrical. Increase in inspiratory pressure could be seen in endobronchial intubations. High pressure, low volume cuff. Generally, we have low volume, high pressure cuffs, low pressure, high volume cuffs, but in certain tubes like red rubber tube and specifically in laser tubes, you have high pressure, low volume cuff in order to have the best seal. Supraglottic devices are not definitive airway. When we talk about the tracheostomy tubes, in one paper it has been asked about the suction time, the appropriate suction time that has to be used. This is 10 to 15 seconds. Done. Pre-oxygenation we discussed for 3 minutes, tidal volume, 4 vital capacity breaths in 30 seconds. RSI, which just discussed about the rapid sequence intubation, Salix maneuver, must to know. Done. Preformed bend is present in RAE tube. You have to recognize the RA tube, which is the north pole, which is the south pole, and for what indications, for which surgeries these the respective tubes can be used. Okay. How many capnographic waves required for successful intubation has been asked. At least 3 capnographic waves have to be there. I hope you remember the most sensitive sign of the conformation of the ET tube is your direct visualization. Most commonly used is your ETCO2 and the gold standard is flexible bronchoscopy. But if flexible fibroscope is not in the option, then the gold standard becomes your ETCO2. A case. A laparoscopic surgery is been going on. The patient has been shifted to Trendelenburg position and suddenly you have a flat line capnogram. What could be the reason behind it? The reason could be multiple. The most common reason behind would be your disconnection. Sudden flat line capnogram when sudden change in position has been there could be because of the disconnection. But please remember, if the tube has been displaced or the tube has become endobronchial because of the position change, the capnography will never come as a flat line. Okay. Now, the positive pressure ventilation limits I have already discussed and ET tube confirmation has been done. Last of all is this image. I have a real love for this image. I don't know why, because I feel that almost these days the quality assurance has been so hyped about that this is something which you all have to know. This is the back cover of your endotracheal tube. If you see at the back cover carefully, you have various signs. And I just want you all to know what these signs stand for in case it is asked in the exam. Let's start. Endotracheal tube cuffed, oral nasal. This is the reference number. Internal diameter, outer diameter. The cuff resting diameter. This is the diameter of the cuff when what adequate pressure or what intracuff pressure or when there is no air. The cuff resting diameter is when there is no air which is present in the cuff. This would be the diameter of the cuff. Okay, this is the cuff resting diameter. Then manufacturing date is given, the expiry date is given. Then there are certain signs which you can see here. Can you see here? Sterility. It is sterilized by using ethylene oxide. This sign stands for don't use this packet if it is opened. Don't reuse it. Don't sterilize it again. No exposure to the sun. Keep away from the sunlight. Temperature sensitive. Below 10 degrees, above 40 degrees Celsius, the tube can go wrong. It can malfunction. So please maintain the temperature of the room where the tubes are being kept, because they're nothing but PVC tubes. They have to be stored in cool and dry places. Okay, so each sign stands for some. Yes, each sign stands for, it has an explanation behind it. Then most important is this DEHP free. It is a type of toxin which is present in the tubes, and it is biologically a pollutant. So that these days what the new tubes are coming, they are free of DHEP. CE, this number is very important because this shows that this tube is compatible with the human tissues. I told you that every tube, everything which has to be inserted inside the human body, it is tested first. So this endotracheal tube material is tested in the intestine of the rabbit, and after they have been tested, they have been verified that these are compatible with the human tissues, then they are given a number which is the CE number. Now, this was all about the airway management and the airway equipments. Please revise this again and again in order to have those images set in your mind, because most of the image based questions come from this very topic. Thank you.